It's Red Podcast, the marketing podcast for experts. I'm David Hooper, coming to you from the Corona Cave. Just kidding. Still in the Red Room. You know, my life really hasn't changed since this quarantine has happened. The only thing that has happened as far as the business goes for me and my wife is that she used to do photo shoots here, and there would be models and stylists and makeup artists and somebody from a company usually to supervise everything. We can't get together like that right now. That's the opportunity that we have as podcasters. So if you've got a podcast, and I know you've got a message to spread because you're here, you have a good opportunity. And I've got more information on that on my other podcast called Build a Big Podcast. It's a podcast specifically for podcasters. If you want that, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I've actually got a few podcasts for podcasters. For example, one of them, I call it the 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge. That's to get your solo podcasting skills up. I've got a podcast jumpstart. I've got a podcast interview school series there. And then the general podcast, Build a Big Podcast. So if you're interested in podcasting, spreading your message via podcasting, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. You know what we're not doing now to spread our message? No live speaking. Right after I released the last episode, that is when coronavirus hit. And the reason you haven't heard from me on this follow-up episode was because I wanted to wait just a minute to get a feel for what was happening, because it seems like what's happening changes daily. I can't give you a lot of accurate information as far as how coronavirus will affect your business other than saying things will come back around. They might be different, but they will come back. Eventually, we will start getting together again. Eventually, people are going to want that human connection. They want it now, but we've got these substitutes. We've got podcasts like this one, like your podcast maybe, blog posts, email newsletters. But speaking, at least in person, that is not one of those things that we have now. However, because it is coming back, if you are ready for it, you are going to be in great shape. So let's get you ready. I want you to think about the stock market in the 90s. Everybody was making money, but you had to have money in order to make money. If you weren't able to invest in the stock market in the 90s, you couldn't take advantage of it. And in order to invest, you had to do the work before the thing hit. They didn't know it was going to hit like it did. And that's what I'm trying to get you to do now. If you can't remember the 90s, maybe you weren't born yet, think about real estate over the last few years. The boom that we've seen in real estate over the last few years, that same type of boom is going to happen for live events and speaking. Like I said, we're going to be ready to get out. We're going to be ready to see people again. And when that switch is flipped, you're going to be ready for it. On the last episode, Grant covered a lot of ideas regarding speaking. And he's certainly done a lot more speaking than I have, because speaking was his job. For me, speaking is a way to spread a message. It's a way that I built my company. It is a way for me to get information out to people that I want them to know. So I want to share some big ideas on speaking that are from a little bit of a different perspective. This is from a guy who had a business, has a business, and uses speaking to grow that business, build connection with people, and to make money. Sometimes directly through the speaking, sometimes it's something related to the speech that I'm giving. Maybe I'm getting business directly from that speaking. And sometimes it's just to expand my authority. Because when you come in like an expert, you don't have to market as hard. People come to you, and you are able to charge more when you are seen as a celebrity in your business. So here are some big ideas on speaking from that perspective. Somebody who doesn't speak a lot, but does speak on a regular basis. By the way, I had about 4 events cancel within a week after coronavirus hit. I'm not a road warrior, but I'm doing this on a pretty regular basis. And I've been doing this for a while, and that brings me to my first big idea. You need to jump in with speaking. And the way that you may be able to do that now, just to get that training, be ready for when that switch flips and we're ready to go back to live speaking, is doing it via online broadcast, via live broadcast. That could be via Zoom. Something like Spreaker, if you're more of an audio person, that lets you distribute your message live, just like a broadcast radio show. And here's the big point of why you want to do that. The only way for you to get better in front of a live audience is to get in front of a live audience. I started doing radio in 1991. And when I started, it wasn't live on the air. I wasn't a jock. I was a production guy. I was doing documentaries. I was doing stuff where I would go out, do research, come back to the tape room, and it was a tape room. It was literally magnetic tape that I had to slice with a razor blade and tape back together with tape. I was doing much like I'm doing now, but the process took a lot longer. I would go out into the field with a Marantz tape recorder, like a cassette tape recorder, and it was good, but it was still on cassette. Come back, put it on a reel. That's when I would chop it up, get the edits in. Anyway, it took a while for me to get that content out. The content wasn't live, but it did get me used to speaking. So if you were doing a podcast, even if it's not live, while the best way for you to get used to speaking is live, the skills you were developing by doing something where you edit later, that's still going to help you. But it's not a replacement for getting out and doing it live. The transition for me to doing it live, eventually I moved up, I guess it was a move up, to getting live on the air, playing music, going in and out of tracks. Sometimes I would do interviews, but not like I'm doing now. So that was a different skill. It had the live thing, but it didn't have the long form content that I'm talking about now with doing either a speech or doing something like a podcast. And that transition continued with me getting in front of a live audience, like where I could actually see them, was getting on various panels. I was flying around the country, going to a lot of music marketing events. This was back in 1995, in the late 90s. Tons of panels. Sometimes I would moderate them, sometimes I would just be on them. And I did dozens of these things, from South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, to CMJ in New York, to really anybody who would have me. I remember doing at least a couple of events in Athens, Georgia, Indianapolis, did something in West Virginia. I was going anywhere and everywhere that would have me. And for me, that was easy, because I was able to bounce my message off of what somebody had previously said, or more or less have a conversation with the people who are on stage with me. If you've got a podcast, you might be able to relate to this, because a lot of beginning podcasters, what do? You have a co-host, you have people that you're interviewing. You like to bounce your message off of other people, and it's not all on you to have 100% of that content. And that'll help you for eventually getting in front of a live audience. But if you want to get good at doing something in front of a live audience, one, you've got to do it. You're probably going to fail, or it's going to at least be a little bit rough. It's got to be just you. The very first speaking presentation that I had, I think it was the late 90s. I remember it was in Philadelphia. It was at an old theater on Arch Street. Again, I was used to doing panels, but I had one of these independent music events. She said, "Why don't you come on up here? We're not doing panels, but you can speak." And I think the reason why she did that was because she didn't want to fly a bunch of panelists in. Imagine this. You've got 5 or 6 of these sessions. Each of them has 3, maybe 5 people. You've got to fly those people in. You've got to coordinate with them. First of all, you've got to find them. Even that can get complicated, getting somebody to fly across the country just to sit on a panel for 1 hour. So she wasn't doing panels. And you'll see this with a lot of live events. It's much easier to fill an event with single speakers than it is panelists. And I'd never done solo speaking before, but I'd been on panels before, and I'd been doing conference calls. We used to do this thing via the phone. I would get on, speak much like it was a radio broadcast. People who were calling in also via the phone, they would listen to me. I had a book at the time. I was very familiar with the content. But on the other hand, I had no idea what I was doing or what it was actually going to be like. And this event, it wasn't really organized. She didn't walk me through the process. I was good at the skills that I had. The event promoter just assumed that I was going to be able to get up there and speak by myself. I wasn't. Luckily, I had a friend of mine there, a guy named Derek Sivers. You may have seen some of his TED Talks, read some of his books. He was in the music business with me at the time. So he and I got in front of this group together. He did the heavy lifting. And by that, I mean, he just shared the stage with me. I was doing as much talking as Derek was. We were going back and forth with each other. It was a co-event. It wasn't like I was just hanging there in the sidecar. But having him there enabled me mentally to organize my thoughts. It gave me more confidence because it was more or less like a panel. And I tell you this story to say this. If you are nervous about getting in front of a crowd, this may be an option for you. Since that time, I have organized and promoted a lot more events than I've spoken at. And I can tell you that this happens all the time. People want to come in as a package deal. They want a business partner. Sometimes they'll want a spouse. They want somebody up there with them on stage. It also happens on radio. People are nervous about their voice going into the airwaves. They are nervous about people hearing them and sounding like an idiot. So they'll bring in a friend. Hey, I can bring in a band with me. Hey, I can bring in this guy that I'm working with. He's got an interesting story. Does it limit your options? Somewhat. If you're going to a live event, people might not want to fly in a second person. You might be on your own for that. But it is an option. It will get you in the game. And it may build your authority in a different way than you could do it on your own. Personally, I recommend you're the only guy up there. When you're the only guy, you've got the authority. But if it's somebody like Derek Sivers that you're up there, and Derek was well established in the music industry at the time. People don't know this, but he ran a big company called CD Baby. He was well loved, respected. He was sending all these musicians checks every week. That was part of it. So people loved him. So me to be up there on that stage with him, that made me look good. Sharing a stage with somebody good, it's not going to kill your authority. It may not help it in the way that you're going to be helped if you do it yourself, but it may help you in a different way. Continuing on this thread, play your game. When you're in front of a live crowd, you know instantly if your message is connecting. Also, when people see you on stage, they experience you as you are. I was talking to my radio producer yesterday. I was telling him that a lot of times when I go out, people say, oh, you've got such a great radio voice. And people will recognize my voice from time to time, but sometimes people will say, oh, you sound different on the radio. And that could be a couple of things. It could be because how I act when a microphone is on, it's going to be different than if I'm just talking one-on-one to somebody. But part of that is the compression. Right now, my voice is going through a DBX 286S, and I'm compressing it, and I've got EQ, and I've got a gate, so you can't hear me breathing. Take that off, man. I'm going to sound like I've got emphysema. When that gate's on, sounding smooth, baby. You're not going to necessarily have those things when you are live on stage. And again, it's a performance. When that mic is on, it's a performance, but they are going to see the real you or as close to it as they possibly can. The other thing I like about it is that you are hitting all of their senses at once. They're seeing you. They get close enough, they can smell you. They can reach out and touch you. They can hear you. They are getting all of your senses at once. Right now, you're just listening to me. You've got one of those senses being activated. Those are 3 reasons why speaking might be better than something like a podcast. But if speaking isn't for you, it's not for you. I recently questioned this. You may have heard the podcast episode I did a few months ago about me taking the stage and having a panic attack right there in front of a huge crowd of people. And this is me after 20-something years of getting on stages. I've thought about that a lot over the last few months. And let me tell you why I think that it happened. I think it was because I was doing somebody else's speech. And what I mean by that is there was a lot of pressure on me to deliver a certain type of content and deliver it in a certain way. It's a big event. They've got big sponsors. They're worried about making those sponsors mad. I took that to heart. I didn't want to embarrass this meeting planner. So when I'm mentioning examples, if I mention one company, I need to mention the other company. I can't mention this company without making that other company mad. So it was a really fine line for me to walk. That, a 3-camera shoot, all those people, the noise, it's not the environment that I would have picked. I like a quiet studio. When I'm doing something live, I like smaller groups where I can interact with the audience. So I've been thinking about all those things, and I'm especially thinking about all those things before this last presentation that I did, right before everything went on lockdown for coronavirus. But I was like, f*** it. I'm just going to get up on the stage and do what I do, not try to perform something the way somebody else would. I'm going to play my game. And that goes back to what I said about having a friend on stage with you. If you need to do that, doing a co-presentation, do it. If that's what gets you in the game, do it. Same for your podcast. If you've got to have a co-host, if you want to do interviews, if you're not feeling like doing a solo podcast, do it. You do you. Quick side note, I've been talking about why speaking in some ways is better than podcasting. One of the ways that podcasting is better than speaking is the exact opposite. It's because you can practice in a safe space. You can do the entire process of outlining a podcast, organizing your thoughts, recording the podcast, editing the podcast, and nobody ever has to see it. You don't have to release it. So thinking like that, if you're trying to develop these skills, do look into doing a solo podcast. You can do all of those things that I just said and never release it. I mentioned it at the top of the episode, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I've got the 30-day solo podcast challenge. I've got exercises that I will walk you through to improve your solo podcasting. Do it. Record it. Nobody has to hear it, just for you. By doing it, even if you don't release it, you will get better at these skills for your live events, for one-on-one, for organizing your thoughts. And nobody has to know that you've done it, but they'll know the results, and you'll know the results too. So I encourage you to do that. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. That goes back to the first thing that I said. Jump in, give it a try, even if it feels a little bit weird at first. Third big idea, let's call this multiple vehicles. The more ways that you can reach people, the better. And I'm not talking about what some people call be everywhere. Be everywhere is stupid. You don't need to be everywhere. You just need to be where your people are. And you need to make it seem to them that you are everywhere because you're where they are. What I'm talking about when I say multiple vehicles, part of it is what I talked about a minute ago. It's hitting those different senses, letting them see you, touch you, taste you, smell you, feel you. But it's also getting your message out to them in different locations. A podcast, you listen to it in the car, maybe you listen to it at the gym. You're not going to necessarily listen to it at home. A video, you're not going to listen to that in a car. Maybe you do watch that at home. Maybe you put it up on a big screen TV. People can see you there. Live event, you're going to consume that wherever the venue is. And people are getting your message in different ways, with different senses, at different times of the day, at different days of the week, with different people around. The more you can infiltrate their lives, not just one aspect of their lives, the more your message is going to connect with them. Think about how distracted we are. When you're at a live event, you are fully focused. Speaking is a great way to cut through the distraction. When people are at a live event, they are fully focused. They've got their buddies around them. They're experiencing something together, and they are listening to your message. They are watching you. They are connecting with you. Another great reason to do speaking, even if you're not like Grant Baldwin, even if you don't want to go full-time, make a lot of money at it, even if you just want to spread the message, attach it on the side of your existing business, it is a great option for those reasons. So to recap these big ideas, the first one, jump in. You're not going to get better unless you jump in. It's not going to be perfect at the beginning, but in order to get more perfect, you're going to have to jump in, make a few mistakes. The second one, play your game. If you need somebody to get up on stage with you, if you need a co-host, if you need a ghostwriter to get your message out, whatever, get the help that you need to do what it is that you want to do. Eventually, you will become better. You get so confident on stage with that second person, you say, yeah, maybe I want to try this out without the training wheels. And that's not to say having a co-host or having somebody up on the stage with you is training wheels, but it could be if solo work is your end goal, or it could be the end goal itself. Some people are better as a team. And finally, the third big idea, multiple vehicles. The more ways you can reach people, and the different ways that you can reach people, either through the different senses that you reach, or the different times of day, or the different types of consumption that they have. That's going to be good for getting your message to connect with people. I'm going to give you a final thought before we wrap this up. Life will move on. We're going to get past coronavirus, COVID-19, quarantine. People are tough. We're going to work through this, and we're going to come out on the other side. I know a lot of people, especially the people who listen to this podcast, maybe even you, self-employed. You've got ups and downs with your business. You're worried about the economic impacts of this situation, and for very good reason. But you can worry a little bit less if you focus on these two things. The first is connection, which is what your podcast and your online work is doing. That connection is going to set the stage for when this thing moves out and we can get back together again. The second thing, this is huge, solving a problem, helping people move beyond this. If you are in that business, you will be fine because there are a lot of people who are looking to move beyond this. They're in big pain. They're having those economic issues that I'm talking about, the ups and downs. If you can help them with that, you will help yourself by being a little bit more stable with your business, with your situation. Right now, Grant Baldwin is doing this with his podcast, The Speaker Lab. He was a weekly podcast, and right now to get through this time, he's going several days a week talking to event planners, to speakers, to other people in the speaking industry, saying, hey, here's the situation that we're in. How are you moving beyond this? How are you preparing for when this is going to be over? You can do the same thing with your content, blogs, live videos, podcasts. However you are getting your message out there, you have a great opportunity of helping people move beyond this by solving a problem, get connected with each other, and focusing on a solution. Speaking of help, I'm available to you if you want help spreading your message via podcasting. Reach out to me. bigpodcast.com is the website. You will find more information about what I can do for you there. You will find those podcasts that I talked about, how to build a big podcast, how to get better at your interviewing skills, how to get better at solo podcasting, how to get better at marketing your podcast. It is all there at bigpodcast.com. Thanks so much for riding out coronavirus with me. I hope you're finding the positives of this, the way we're able to reconnect with people, the way we're able to really get down to what's important in our lives. It's frustrating now, but it's going to get better. We're going to come out on the other side of this, and we're going to be better people and a better society for it. Again, reach out to me, bigpodcast.com, and I will see you on the next episode of Red Podcast.